Beware, there is a cunning, invisible force poised to undermine every tender and hopeful connection you so earnestly build. And that, my dear friend, is the subject of our gathering today. Indeed, it is the very title we must urgently discuss. Your fears are sabotaging your relationship. Have I captured your attention? I do hope so, for we are about to embark on a reflective journey, replete with revelations and perhaps even a few astonishing confessions. Now, shall we press on? Let me start with a confession of my own. I've known fear intimately, sat with it, drank tea with it, tried to charm it into leaving, only to discover it had grown roots deep within my mind. My dear viewer, the tragedy is that we often befriend our fears. We misunderstand them, letting them dictate our actions and our silences. This, most especially, in the realm of love. When I say fear, I don't refer to bogeymen that lurk in dark corners. I speak of the anxieties and insecurities that stealthily shape how we attach, how we bond, how we dance around closeness or distance, how we show our hearts or hide them away. These patterns go by the fancy names of anxious and avoidant attachment. But oh, the pain, the quiet heartbreak they can sow if we remain blind to their power. I recall a dear friend, let's call him Edward, whose entire childhood was a tapestry of inconsistent warmth. Imagine a small boy, always trying to guess if mother would be glowing with affection or lost in her own sorrows. He learned early that love was perhaps a fleeting spark, something you had to chase, cling to, or else it might vanish. Fast forward to adulthood. Edward became the quintessential anxious attacher. He would watch his phone as though it were a crystal ball, waiting for the next message, the next sign of reassurance from his beloved. If his partner delayed in responding, he felt cast adrift, lost on a turbulent sea of dread. She's left me, he'd think. I've done something wrong. Isn't it remarkable how that old fear of abandonment can so effortlessly slip into the present, coloring every moment? On the other side of this curious coin lies someone like Mary, a woman I once knew who believed from her earliest days that vulnerability was akin to walking through a viper's den. You see, Mary learned that when she cried or faltered, the people around her would withdraw. In her childhood home, weakness or imperfection was met with cold disapproval. So Mary grew into an avoidant attacher. She carried herself with a regal independence, never asking for help, never letting anyone in beyond a polite handshake at the gates of her heart. And when conflict arose in her romantic relationships, her immediate reflex was to retreat behind a fortress of aloofness. "That's not relevant," she'd say when confronted with emotional matters. "Let's not talk about that." It appeared calm, even dignified, but in truth, she was terrified. Terrified of being known, terrified that if her flaws were discovered, love would crumble. We might think Edward and Mary are extreme cases, but the truth is, many of us share their experiences in subtler shades. Perhaps you've found yourself orchestrating every holiday, every weekend outing, ensuring everything is perfect so your partner will never have a reason to leave. Or maybe you're the one who keeps busy from dawn to dusk, seldom letting your significant other glimpse that fearful question in your eyes. Would you still love me if you saw all of me? Whether you identify more with anxious or avoidant tendencies, the real question remains, are your fears driving the car? Because if they are, dear friend, it's time we take those keys back. I won't mince words. Fear is a devious master. It will whisper, "Keep texting them or else they'll forget you." Or, "If you don't keep your distance, you'll surely be hurt." It'll spin tales that feel so convincing. Yet ironically, these very strategies, chasing desperately or walling off behind stony silence, push your beloved away. It's like watering a plant too much or not at all. Both lead to withering. Let's dissect this further. For the anxiously attached, every perceived threat of disconnection blares like a siren. One missed call, one postponed date, and the mind spirals. They're bored of me. They've found someone better. Or, I'm not enough. These fears trigger coping mechanisms: overgiving, over-complimenting, over-apologizing. Perhaps you've tried these, in the hope that if you offer more affection, more devotion, your beloved could never possibly turn away. But my friend, any good partnership craves the breath of reciprocity. When you operate purely from fear, you unwittingly place your partner on a pedestal, demanding constant reassurances and proofs of loyalty. That scrutiny can be rather exhausting for them, wouldn't you agree? Conversely, for the avoidantly attached, closeness can feel like a claustrophobic corridor. Even if you long for connection, after all, we are human, there's a reflex to sabotage it. The moment you sense real intimacy or the threat of emotional entanglement, you shut down. "Oh, I'm busy," you'll say, or "I don't want to discuss that." You might refuse to engage in conflict resolution because it implies you have to show vulnerability. But in love, to be seen for who you truly are is both a risk and a reward. To those who identify with the avoidant side, your fortress walls may protect you from the immediate pang of rejection, but they also prevent you from experiencing the profound closeness you deeply, secretly yearn for. Now, allow me to share a personal anecdote. Long ago, I found myself in a relationship with someone I adored. She was bright, compassionate, and more attuned to my moods than I was to my own. But rather than reciprocate that warmth, I grew suspicious. Why does she care so much? I wondered. Surely I'm not that interesting. My fear sang a litany of potential betrayals. Maybe she'll leave if she sees your flaws. Maybe you shouldn't get too comfortable. Perhaps she has some hidden motive. And so I kept a careful distance, feigning nonchalance. Eventually, she felt so emotionally shut out that she left. And in my pride, I pretended I was fine. But the echo of that loss lingered for years. You see, it wasn't really her I didn't trust. It was myself, my own sense of worth. I was so convinced that if someone peered closely enough, they'd find a fundamental deficiency in me. So I tried to hide it all behind a facade. And the facade cost me something precious. That, my dear friend, is the irony of fear. By striving to protect ourselves, by trying to guarantee safety through anxious vigilance or stoic avoidance, we often create the very outcomes we dread. The anxious partner's relentless pursuit can feel suffocating, prompting the other to distance themselves. The avoidant partner's distance can frustrate and sadden their partner, prompting them to leave. Fear's prophecies become self-fulfilling. But do not despair. We are not doomed to remain shackled by our old attachments. The first step is to see them for what they are. Name your fear. Call it out as politely or as sternly as you like. Ask yourself, when I feel neglected, do I overfunction? Do I chase? Do I cling? Or, when I feel demanded of, do I withdraw, shut down, criticize to keep people from seeing my vulnerabilities? Shine a light on those habits, because once you see fear's shape, you can wrest control from it. Let's take a moment to consider how these dynamics play out in ordinary life. If you're anxious, you might volunteer to plan everything: the holidays, the birthdays, the quiet evenings at home. Not because you delight in organization, though you might, but because you want to feel indispensable. If you're avoidant, perhaps you prefer picking fights over trivial matters to keep emotional discussions at bay. Alternatively, you might rely on the "I'm too busy with work" excuse to ensure no one gets too close. In both cases, the underlying fear is the same. If they really see me, my flaws, my doubts, they'll leave. Or, if I loosen my vigilance, my partner will slip away. Isn't it remarkable how similar these convictions are, despite manifesting so differently? Now let me share another story. This one from a woman I knew, an older lady named Margaret. She had been married 4 times, each ending in a bitter dissolution. When she finally found the courage to seek help and reflect, she discovered a rather heartbreaking truth. In each marriage, She had sabotaged the connection the moment she felt true closeness. I couldn't stand the thought of losing them, she told me, so I pushed them away before they could leave me. A twisted logic, wouldn't you say? But oh, how human it is, and how quietly destructive. It was only after a painful series of realizations and practicing vulnerability in incremental steps that she found a partner with whom she could share her deepest fears openly. This, dear viewer, is a testament that such transformation is indeed possible, even late in life. I'd like to offer you a gentle challenge. Turn inward for a moment. Ask yourself, am I comfortable receiving love? You might think, of course I am. Who doesn't want love? But consider what it means. Receiving love requires letting someone see your real self, lumps and bumps included. Receiving love means trusting that someone's affection is genuine and can exist even when you're not perfect. It means stepping out of the role of caretaker, star performer, stoic pillar, or comedic relief, and allowing someone to hold you in your vulnerability. For the anxious among us, that can be terrifying because we fear we're not truly worthy. For the avoidant, that can be equally terrifying because we fear we might lose the safe independence that's become our survival strategy. How then do we break these chains? Communication, for starters. Vulnerable, honest communication. If you feel that flicker of panic when your partner is silent for a few hours, share that fear gently, without accusation. I know this might sound a bit irrational, but when you don't text back, I worry that you've grown distant or that I've upset you somehow. Notice, that's not the same as angrily demanding, "Why haven't you texted me back? Don't you care?" Instead, you reveal the fragile kernel of fear within you, inviting your partner to help soothe it. And if you identify as more avoidant, perhaps the next time your partner initiates a serious conversation, instead of shutting down, you could say, "I sense myself wanting to withdraw right now. It's difficult for me to talk about these things because I'm worried I won't express myself well." By articulating what's happening internally, you connect, ironically by admitting your temptation to disconnect. That is the wonder of vulnerability. I suspect some of you might protest, but my partner doesn't handle these conversations well. They judge me, or they shut down too. Precisely. Perhaps your partner has their own fears. That's why it's called a relationship dynamic. It's rarely one-sided. If both parties can commit to self-awareness and compassionate listening, progress can be made. But dear friend, if you're the only one trying to do the work, if the other refuses to meet you halfway, that's information worth acknowledging. True intimacy demands a two-way street. You can guide, invite, and model healthy behavior, but you cannot force another to follow. Let's delve a bit deeper into the anxious side again. Imagine you've had a misunderstanding with your partner. You're ruminating, heart pounding, checking your phone anxiously. Perhaps you type a 10-paragraph text, explaining every nuance of your feelings, hoping for immediate solace. But what if you took a moment, breathed deeply, and asked, "What am I truly afraid of?" Maybe the fear is that you are unlovable unless you micromanage your partner's perception of you. But is that absolutely true? Might you be lovable even without polishing every detail? Of course you are. Might your relationship stand a chance even if you let it breathe for a moment? In all likelihood, yes. When you name and challenge these fears with gentle curiosity, you loosen their grip. As for the avoidance side, imagine a scenario where your partner expresses disappointment in you. They might say, "I felt hurt when you canceled our date again." Your first instinct might be to dismiss it. "It's not a big deal," or "You're overreacting." But consider pausing. Instead of brushing it off, you might respond, "I hear that you're hurt. It's difficult for me to handle these conversations because I fear being seen as a failure or a disappointment. Let me think about how I can make it up to you." My dear friend, do you see how such a response invites healing rather than shutting the door? By naming the fear, that dreaded sense of failure, you open a window for connection rather than building another layer of defensive stone around your heart. I can almost hear some of you saying, "But this is too risky. What if they use my vulnerability against me?" Indeed, vulnerability entails risk. Yet consider that risk in context. Avoiding vulnerability in your closest relationship is like refusing to plant seeds in a garden for fear of storms. Without seeds, there is no growth, no harvest, no flowers. Closeness, the genuine kind, cannot blossom without that willingness to be known. Yes, there is a chance you might feel pain or rejection, but life without authentic connection can be a sorrow of its own. Which sadness would you rather bear? Let's approach the idea of self-compassion as well. Often, anxious individuals beat themselves up for being needy, while avoidant individuals beat themselves up for being cold. Neither self-criticism is entirely fair. The anxious stance often developed because a child learned love was unpredictable. The avoidant stance often developed because emotional openness was never rewarded, perhaps even punished. These patterns are protective strategies that once served a purpose, to help a child cope with an inconsistent or critical environment. The tragedy is that these strategies outlive their usefulness in adulthood, wreaking havoc in our relationships if left unexamined. By viewing yourself with compassion, you allow for the possibility of change. You stop labeling yourself as too clingy or too distant, and instead see the frightened child within, who is simply trying to keep safe. And from that place of understanding, real transformation becomes possible. Speaking of transformation, might I offer you a simple practice? Each day, set aside a few minutes to journal about your emotional reactions, particularly those triggered by your partner or by potential romantic interests if you're currently single. Ask yourself questions like, what did I feel? What story did I tell myself about what this feeling meant? Is it possible that I'm catastrophizing? How might I respond more calmly next time? This exercise isn't meant to shame you. It's about shining light into the shadowy corners of your fears, because once you see them, you can begin to unravel their hold. Allow me to illustrate with another brief story. I once watched a man named Thomas go from being unreachably avoidant to becoming a stable, nurturing partner. How? Through introspection and open dialogue. Early in his relationship, if his girlfriend expressed frustration, he'd clam up. He'd disappear for days on end, ignoring calls. But as he began reading about attachment styles, reflecting on his own childhood experiences, and practicing communication with his girlfriend, he recognized the pattern. Whenever someone is displeased with me, I feel worthless. My father used to scold me mercilessly for small mistakes, so I learned to hide or escape rather than face conflict. Once he understood this, he was able to articulate it to his partner. The next time conflict arose, instead of running, he said, "I'm feeling overwhelmed. I need a moment to collect my thoughts. Could we revisit this tonight, after dinner?" That small shift in transparency made all the difference. Over time, conflict turned into productive conversations, rather than a swirl of unresolved tension. Now let's consider the bigger picture. If you're anxious, part of you might dream that the right partner will finally solve all your insecurities. Or if you're avoidant, perhaps you imagine that once you find the perfect, non-demanding partner, you'll be able to settle comfortably. The reality is that no external person can magically mend your internal fears unless you do the brave inner work. In fact, even a very loving, understanding partner can only do so much if you remain convinced that love is fleeting or that vulnerability is dangerous. So yes, a wonderful partner can facilitate healing, but the journey is yours. You must choose to face the little demon of insecurity whispering in your ear. There is beauty in acknowledging how universal these struggles are. Look around the world, and you'll find countless people who share your experiences. Some anxious, some avoidant, some blessedly secure. The difference lies in how they respond to these fears. The secure individual might still feel a twinge of anxiety or a desire to withdraw now and then. but they recognize these impulses and gently self-correct. They trust themselves enough to trust their partner. And that, my friend, is our shared goal. To trust ourselves enough to engage with love wholeheartedly. Another helpful reflection is to examine your friendships. Notice if you approach close friendships with a similar pattern, constantly texting and needing reassurance, or rarely letting friends into your personal struggles. Sometimes it's easier to experiment with new ways of relating in friendships before applying them to a romantic relationship. The stakes might feel lower, giving you space to practice vulnerability without as much fear of heartbreak. Now, the question arises, what if you're single? Are these attachment issues still relevant? Absolutely. One's attachment style influences how we navigate the entire realm of connection, whether we approach new people with curiosity or trepidation, whether we sabotage budding relationships by texting too often or by not texting at all, whether we believe ourselves worthy of love or fear rejection so intensely that we avoid opportunities to connect. You can use your single time as a laboratory for self-discovery. Rather than lamenting your singleness, see it as a chance to explore what it means to hold your own self in love, to become attuned to your triggers before you invite a new partner into your life. That self-knowledge becomes a gift to your future relationship. There is an old parable. A traveler came upon two stonecutters and asked them what they were doing. One said, "I am chipping away at this stone." The other replied, "I am building a cathedral." Perspective matters. In a similar vein, you might say, "I'm stuck in a relationship pattern." Or you could say, "I'm learning about my old wounds so I can build a life of deep love and trust." Reframing the narrative can provide hope. After all, the reason you're listening to this conversation suggests you have the courage to face these fears. Don't discount that bravery. As we approach the final stretch of our discussion, I invite you to examine the following question. Are you, at this very moment, willing to see yourself as worthy of love without having to strain or shrink? Can you hold the possibility that you are lovable simply by being who you are, free from excessive performance or guarded distance? For some, that idea might spark a wave of sadness, because it challenges the deeply ingrained belief that we must always earn or defend love. But dear friend, that sadness can be a tender opening, a sign that you're shedding an old constrictive suit of armor. If your childhood taught you that love was unsafe or inconsistent, it's natural that your mind tries to protect you. But here is a truth worth embracing. You are no longer that child. Yes, that child lives on inside you, but you, today, are an adult with choices, resources, and the ability to practice new skills. You can learn to comfort yourself, to self-soothe, to communicate your needs, to stay present when tension arises, to see conflict not as a threat of doom, but as an invitation to greater understanding. Your past might have shaped you, but it does not have to dictate your future. In practical terms, therapy or counseling can be immensely helpful. A safe therapeutic relationship can serve as a laboratory for trying new ways of relating. Books on attachment theory, journaling, mindfulness practices. These are all valuable tools in your arsenal against fear. But do remember, reading and reflecting are the first steps. True change unfolds in the moment-to-moment choices you make in your relationships. To speak or to stay silent, to stay present or to flee, to accuse or to share vulnerably, to condemn or to show compassion. And what of relationships that are currently fraught with these issues? The question arises, should I stay and work on it or should I go? The answer, alas, is as unique as you are. Sometimes, two partners can come together in mutual effort, each acknowledging their vulnerabilities, forging a stronger bond. Other times, one partner may be too entrenched in fear or unwilling to change. In such cases, you may find that preserving your own well-being requires moving on. Either way, be honest with yourself about your capacity for growth and your partner's willingness to join you on that path. Before we conclude, I'd like to leave you with a final image. Picture a large, intricate tapestry. Each thread is a moment in your life, each color a feeling. Some are bright, others dark. When woven together, they create the pattern of your present self, including your attachment style and your fears. This tapestry is not static. You have the chance every day to weave new threads, to add shimmering lines of courage and honesty, to mend tears of neglect. By recognizing and confronting your fears, by choosing to communicate rather than hide, you begin to alter the design. Over time, you'll see that your tapestry grows richer, more resilient, more capable of holding the deeper hues of genuine intimacy. So, dear friend, take heart. Your fears might have sabotaged past relationships. They might still be lurking in the shadows, trying to sabotage the relationship you're in now, or the one you hope to be in. But you are not doomed to repeat old stories. By unveiling these fears, naming them, sharing them with the people closest to you, and slowly learning to trust both yourself and your partner, you create a new narrative. One that honors your vulnerability rather than punishing it. One that nurtures connection rather than severing it. I would like to thank you for listening, for having the courage to peer into this mirror, for entertaining the possibility that all is not lost, that perhaps, beneath the anxious text messages or the avoidant silences, there lies a heart that wants nothing more than to be cherished, understood, and free. If there is a single takeaway from your fears of sabotaging your relationship, anxious and avoidant attachment, it is this. Fear's power diminishes when confronted with mindful awareness and open-hearted truth. As you move forward, remember, you have a choice at every turn. Each moment you become aware of your fear, you can respond differently. You can say to that frightened inner voice, I hear you, I see you, but I will not let you decide how I love. You can grant yourself permission to be seen and to see others in return. You can relinquish the exhausting role of detective, always on the lookout for betrayal, and replace it with the role of companion, co-creator, and friend. And so, I leave you with this final benediction. May you find the bravery to lay down your defenses, the humility to acknowledge your wounds, and the resilience to keep offering and receiving love, even when it feels vulnerable. In time, you may look back upon your anxious or avoidant self and whisper with gratitude, "Thank you for trying to protect me, but I have learned a better way." Go forth then, with compassion for yourself and for those you hold dear. In that compassion lies the seed of all that is truly loving and enduring. May your tapestry be woven with threads of honesty, patience, trust, and the gentle courage to let yourself be known. And with that, dear friend, I bid you well on this extraordinary journey of healing and connection. Be kind to yourself, and watch how life and love transform in response.
If you believe this video might help someone dear to you, share it with them. A small gesture on your part could mean the world to a friend in need.